Welcome to the deep dive. I want you to just picture a scene down in Boca Chica,
Oh,
Texas.
yeah, the starbase.
Right. You're standing there on this flat, marshy coastline. The air is, really thick. The sky is clear. And plummeting down from the literal edge of space is this 120-meter tall tower of solid steel.
It's basically a skyscraper.
Exactly. The skyscraper in a controlled free fall, roaring with fire.
Hmm.
And waiting for it on the ground isn't a massive, flat landing pad like we're usually used to seeing.
No, it's that giant launch tower with those colossal mechanical chopstick arms.
Yeah, Megazilla. And as the rocket descends, fighting gravity with this massive plume of superheated exhaust, those giant metal arms just smoothly close and catch the rocket perfectly in midair.
It's wild. I mean, it's not science fiction anymore. It is happening right in front of us.
And it's just breathtaking to watch.
It really is the ultimate display of kinetic energy being wrestled into total submission. Because when you watch a 120-meter Starship being caught out of the sky by mechanical chopsticks, you aren't just looking at a rocket launch. You're looking at a fundamental shift in our relationship with orbital mechanics.
Right, because it's so high stakes.
Exactly. It's totally binary in its execution. I mean, it either works perfectly or it results in a catastrophic explosion.
There's no in between.
None. But when it works, you are seeing millions of complex calculations, aerodynamics, material sciences, all converging in a fraction of a second.
And that visceral, ear-shattering moment of the rocket catch is exactly the starting point for our deep dive today. We have a really fascinating stack of sources in front of us.
We really do.
At the center is this highly creative thought experiment. It's a scripted dialogue that imagines a meeting between the legendary late astronomer Carl Sagan and engineer Elon Musk.
Standing right together at the Starbase Control Center, watching that exact rocket catch.
Exactly. But we're combining that specific dialogue with a whole stack of our own research notes on aerospace engineering, artificial intelligence, and, surprisingly, macroeconomics.
Yeah, because what makes this stack of sources so compelling is that we're taking that rocket catch and using it to launch into a deeply practical yet, highly philosophical conversation.
Right.
We're taking the brute force power of rocket science and viewing it through the lens of profound cosmic wonder, and then somehow through the lens of global finance.
Which is such a pivot. But our mission today is to extract the most important insights from these materials. Because, this isn't just some fun sci-fi what-if scenario.
No, not at all.
We're looking at a profound exploration of three massive ideas. First, the existential reason why humanity must become a multi-planetary species.
The big why.
Right. Second, the exact tangible technologies being built right now to make that happen. And third, and this is the twist that really blew my mind, why the ultimate engine driving this entire cosmic expansion isn't just pure science.
But actually the American stock market and the big tech ecosystem.
Exactly. It's a narrative arc that forces us to connect the poetry of the cosmos with the pulsing data centers of Wall Street.
It's looking at how the highest, most abstract aspirations of human intellect are just completely unbreakably linked to modern macroeconomic realities.
Okay, so let's unpack this, starting with the existential why. Because before we get into the how of conquering space, the rockets, the robots, all the math, we're dropped right into a philosophical debate about the very nature of our existence.
Which is necessary context.
Yeah, because if you're listening to this on your commute or while washing dishes, it's super easy to wonder why we should care about going to Mars when we have so many problems right here.
Oh, absolutely. And we really have to understand the underlying terror and awe that drives this entire push for the stars before we can understand the machines they're actually building.
Right. So in the thought experiment, we see Carl Sagan reacting to this successful rocket catch. And true to his legacy, Sagan views it with this deep, profound sense of awe.
As he...
Yeah. He looks at this massive metal behemoth finding its way back to the exact spot it left, and he calls it a beautiful demonstration of our understanding of the universe's laws. It's this huge triumph of human intellect.
But then, almost immediately, the ideas pivot.
Yeah, they do.
They pivot to this concept Sagan famously championed, the pale blue dot.
I love that concept. Let's talk about that.
Well, the pale blue dot is one of the most vital perspective shifts in modern history. It's the idea that when you zoom out, even just to the edge of our own solar system, the Earth is nothing more than a fraction of a pixel in a photograph.
A speck of dust.
Exactly. The universe is unimaginably vast, and it is incredibly cold.
Sagan points out that all of our human efforts, entire history, all the love, all the intellect, everything we have ever accomplished is just a tiny fleeting moment on a fragile speck of dust floating in a dark void.
It's humbling.
It is. And the terrifying part of the pale blue dot isn't just the physical size, right? It's the fragility. The research emphasizes that a single rogue asteroid, a massive solar flare, or some runaway climate disaster could wipe it all out in an instant.
All of it, gone forever.
Yeah.
What's really fascinating here is the precise emotional contrast being drawn in the source text. Sagan is expressing what we might call poetic existential dread.
Oh, I like that phrasing.
Right. He looks at our mastery of physics with the rocket catch, but then immediately scales up to the cosmic level where that mastery feels, well, entirely insignificant.
Because compared to the universe, we are nothing.
Exactly. He's humbled by the dark void. I mean, if you look at the astrophysical data, Earth has already gone through 5 mass extinction events. Yeah, 5. The vulnerability of having everything we hold dear trapped on one single planetary surface is incredibly acute.
And that's exactly where Musk's counter-perspective comes into the dialogue. And I found this really interesting because he doesn't actually disagree with Sagan at all.
Not at all.
He entirely agrees that the universe is completely indifferent. It doesn't care about us one bit. And as far as we know right now, without other life out there, it's just a profoundly empty, dead space.
But because of that emptiness, the argument flips.
Right. Instead of feeling insignificant, human consciousness, the very fact that we are awake and aware in this universe is framed as an incredibly rare miracle.
This is the vital pivot in the philosophy right here.
Yeah, break that down.
So Sagan sees the rarity of consciousness and feels a sense of profound fragility and humility. But Musk sees the exact same rarity and feels a sense of extreme pragmatic urgency.
Like we have to do something about it.
Exactly. If you follow the logic of something like the Fermi paradox, which essentially asks, if the universe is so big, where is everybody?
Right. Why haven't we seen any aliens?
Right. You realize that conscious life might actually be the rarest phenomenon in nature. And if consciousness is the rarest, most precious thing in a dead universe, then allowing it to be extinguished is the ultimate failure.
So here is an analogy that I came up with while going through these sources, and it really helped me crystallize what's being argued here.
Let's hear it.
Imagine Earth is a single computer hard drive.
Oh, okay.
On this one hard drive, you have the only existing copy of every single thing humanity has ever created.
Oh, man.
Right. Every piece of code, every novel, every scientific discovery, every memory, literally the entirety of human consciousness. And right now, today, we have 0 backups.
0.
We are running the most valuable data in the universe on a single server that is currently floating through a shooting gallery of asteroids and suffering from internal cooling issues.
That's a great way to put it.
Keeping all our eggs in one basket isn't just risky, it's a critical existential threat.
I really like that analogy because it strips away all the romance.
Yeah.
The argument moves us deliberately from a philosophical observation to a strict, actionable engineering protocol. In this framework, becoming a multiplanetary species isn't framed as exploration just for the sake of exploration.
It's not about planting a flag.
Exactly. It isn't about planting flags to stroke the human ego, like we sort of saw in the mid-20th century. It's framed as a mandatory data backup protocol.
A backup protocol, yeah.
It's the absolute prerequisite to ensure that the light of consciousness doesn't get completely extinguished.
But wait, let me push back on this a little bit, just playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
Is consciousness really that fragile? I mean, humans survived ice ages. We survived massive volcanic eruptions with, stone tools. Life on Earth is incredibly resilient. Are we being a little dramatic about the universe trying to kill us?
I mean, it's a fair question, but if we look at the geological and astronomical records in our research, life itself is resilient, sure, but complex civilization is incredibly fragile.
Ah, that's a good distinction.
Right.
Yeah.
A civilization relies on stable climates, predictable agriculture, and increasingly extremely fragile technological infrastructure.
Like the power grid.
Exactly. Think about a Harrington event, a massive solar storm like the one that hit Earth back in 1859. If that happened today, it would fry almost every transformer on the global grid.
We'd be back to the 18th century overnight.
Literally overnight, and that's just a solar flare. An asteroid the size of the one that wiped out the dinosaurs wouldn't just end the grid. It would block out the sun for years, collapsing the entire food chain.
Wow.
So yes, a few humans might survive in deep caves, but the hard drive of our collective scientific and cultural consciousness would be effectively wiped.
Okay, yeah, that paints a pretty stark picture. It takes the romance of space travel and just turns it into a harsh, undeniable mandate for survival. We have to back up the hard drive.
And once that mandate is established, once the existential why is clear, the text shifts immediately to the mechanical how.
Right, because wanting a backup doesn't just magically create one.
Exactly. Having the desire to back up the data doesn't give you the Ethernet cable to do it.
And the source material handles this transition beautifully. It transports us away from Earth. We jump from the testing grounds in Texas to a hypothetical but, very specific location,
Yeah.
a Tesla's SpaceX lunar base.
Which is a huge leap.
Yeah. We are suddenly standing inside a transparent dome on the moon, looking out at the pitch-black void of space.
And this transition grounds the high-level philosophy in cold, hard infrastructure.
Yeah.
We aren't just talking about backing up humanity in the abstract anymore. We are looking at the exact mechanical processes required to actually do it.
And the very first thing we are prompted to look at through the window of this lunar dome isn't like a laser beam or a warp drive.
No.
It's two starships docking together in the vacuum of space to perform in-orbit refueling. Now, I have to admit, when I first read this, it felt almost anticlimactic.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, of all the futuristic things to focus on, why gas stations in space?
Because there is a very deep, mathematically rigorous reason why orbital refueling is the centerpiece of this entire vision. If we connect this to the bigger picture of aerospace engineering, we hit an absolute brick wall called the Tsiolkovsky rocket equation.
Okay, let's unpack this. What exactly is the rocket equation, and why is it such a nightmare for engineers?
Well, the rocket equation dictates the relationship between the mass of a rocket, the mass of its fuel, and the speed it can achieve its delta V.
Okay.
The harsh reality of physics is that Earth's gravity well is incredibly deep. To escape it, you need to go incredibly fast.
Right.
To go incredibly fast, you need a massive amount of fuel. But fuel is heavy.
Yeah.
So to lift the fuel you need to get to space, you actually have to add more fuel just to lift the weight of the original fuel.
Oh, man, it's a vicious cycle. You are
Why not?
constantly burning fuel just to carry the fuel you need to burn.
Precisely. It's an exponential curve that fundamentally works against you. By the time a massive rocket like Starship actually fights its way through the atmosphere and reaches low Earth orbit, it has burned through roughly 90% of its propellant.
90% just to get off the ground.
Just to get to orbit. Now, if you want to take that massive ship loaded with hundreds of tons of cargo and human beings and send it all the way across the solar system to Mars, you simply do not have the fuel left to make the journey.
You're running on fumes.
Exactly. You cannot physically build a rocket on Earth big enough to carry all the fuel needed to launch from the ground and travel to Mars in one single go. The materials would literally collapse under their own weight before it ever left the pad.
Wow.
The math simply does not work.
So it's kind of like trying to drive a massive moving truck across the entire country on a single tank of gas. But the catch is that just pulling out of your driveway and getting onto the highway burned 90% of the tank.
That is exactly it. So what is the solution? You have to refill the tank once you are on the highway.
Ah, I see.
In-orbit refueling is mathematically non-negotiable for a Mars colony. You launch your cargo ship into orbit and it waits there, basically completely empty of fuel.
Just floating there.
Right. Then you launch tanker ships from Earth, one after another, to meet it in orbit and transfer fuel. Only when the cargo ship is completely topped off in the vacuum of space does it have the necessary energy to break out of Earth's orbit and fire its engines for Mars.
But wait, I want to pause here because this sounds really straightforward on paper, but I know it's not. Why is transferring fuel in space such a massive technological hurdle? Like, can't they just hook up a hose, like a mid-air refueling for a fighter jet?
Oh, it is infinitely more complex than a fighter jet, primarily because of the environment. In low Earth orbit, you're in microgravity.
Okay.
And if you have a massive tank of liquid methane and liquid oxygen, which are cryogenic fluids, meaning they are super cooled to hundreds of degrees below zero, they don't just sit at the bottom of the tank like gas in a car.
Right, because there's no gravity pulling it down.
Exactly. In zero gravity, the fluid floats around, it forms globs, it clings to the walls. If you open a valve to pump it, you might just be pumping pressurized gas instead of actual liquid fuel.
Oh, wow. I never even thought about that. You can't pump a liquid if the liquid is just floating in the middle of the tank as a giant bubble.
Exactly.
So how do they actually solve that?
They have to use something called ullage thrust.
Ullage thrust.
Yeah. When the two starships dock back-to-back in space, they actually have to fire small thrusters to accelerate both ships slightly.
Oh.
This creates a tiny artificial sense of gravity, pushing the liquid fuel to the bottom of the tank so it can actually flow through the pipes from the tanker into the cargo ship.
That is insane.
And keep in mind, all of this is happening while they're traveling at 17,000 miles per hour, managing extreme temperature differentials, and dealing with the constant threat of the cryogenic fuel boiling off into gas because of the heat from the sun.
That is just staggering. The level of precision required is mind-blowing. So the argument here is that this specific, highly complex orbital ballet of fluid dynamics is the absolute key.
Yes.
Without mastering in-orbit refueling, going to Mars is just a fantasy. With it, the math suddenly checks out.
Exactly. This specific technology is the bridge. It is the exact mechanism that pulls the concept of a multi-planetary species out of the realm of science fiction and grounds it firmly in mathematical engineering reality. It's the physical prerequisite for the backup drive.
Okay, so the rockets and the orbital refueling solve the transportation problem. We get the backup drive across the ocean, so to speak. But the sources don't stop there, because getting to Mars is only half the battle.
Right. You have to survive once you arrive.
Exactly. Once you get there, you have to survive. And this is where the lunar dome scenario introduces the next crucial detail. Silver Tesla Optimus robots silently installing solar panels in the vacuum of space.
This is a profoundly important shift in the narrative's focus. We've moved from the physics of transportation to the mechanics of colonization.
And I have to admit, when I first read this part, I had a moment of cognitive dissonance. I mean, we usually think of Tesla as a car company.
Sure, most people do.
You see a Tesla on the highway,
Yeah.
you think of a sleek electric sedan for your daily commute. But we're being forced into a completely new framing here. If SpaceX is the giant cargo ship getting us across the perilous ocean, Tesla's providing the tractors, the generators, and the literal laborers we need to actually build the colony once we wash up on the shore.
That is a crucial reframing. We are being urged to look past the consumer products, the cars, and look at the underlying capabilities.
Yeah.
Why humanoid robots? Why solar panels and massive battery packs? Because if you look at the planetary science data for Mars, it is a far harsher environment than Earth.
It's not just a red desert.
Not at all. It is a deadly, freezing environment with an average temperature of minus 80 degrees Fahrenheit. It has an unbreathable atmosphere that's 95% carbon dioxide and atmospheric pressure so low that human blood would literally boil if exposed to it.
And it has no magnetic field, right? So it's just constantly bombarded by cosmic radiation.
Exactly. Human biology has severe hard limits. We cannot just step outside in a flannel shirt and start hammering away at a habitat.
Right.
Building a city requires immense physical labor, moving rocks, welding metal, laying cables. Doing that in a pressurized sweatsuit that limits your mobility while worrying about your oxygen levels and radiation exposure is incredibly inefficient and highly dangerous.
We're soft biological creatures that need highly specific temperatures and a very specific mixture of gases just to not die in 5 minutes. So sending humans to build the initial base is basically a suicide mission.
Which is exactly why the robotics and AI come into play. The idea here elegantly reframes Tesla's core technologies.
How so?
It's artificial intelligence, it's humanoid robotics, and it's sustainable energy systems like solar and batteries. Originally, we think of these technologies as being developed to reduce carbon emissions here on Earth.
Like for climate change.
Exactly. But the broader argument is that these are essentially civilization tools. They are the ultimate toolkit for making a human civilization completely self-sufficient in an extreme, deadly environment.
Let's dig into the robots for a second, because Optimus isn't just a remote-controlled drone, right? How do these robots actually learn to do construction work on another planet?
This is where we get into the weeds of artificial intelligence. Tesla is training these robots using something called end-to-end neural networks.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, in the past, if you wanted a robot to pick up a wrench, a programmer had to write thousands of lines of code explicitly detailing every exact angle of every joint. It was rigid, and it failed the moment the environment changed unpredictably.
Right, if the wrench was an inch to the left, the robot would just grasp at empty air.
Precisely. But the new approach uses AI and video data. They actually have humans perform tasks while wearing motion capture suits and cameras.
Oh, like in movies.
Similar, yeah. The neural network then processes millions of hours of this video data, learning the intent of the action and the physics of the environment.
Wow.
It learns how to balance, how to apply the right amount of grip force, and how to adapt if an object shifts. The robot's brain is figuring out the physics of the real world dynamically, just like a human toddler learns to walk and grab things through trial and error.
So you send these AI-driven robots to Mars first.
Yeah.
They don't need oxygen. They don't care about the cold. They don't get cancer from cosmic radiation. They just do the dangerous, repetitive work of unrolling solar arrays, setting up battery farms, and constructing the pressurized domes.
Yes. The biological limitations of humanity are being completely offset by the mechanical and digital endurance of these machines.
That makes so much sense.
The solar panels harvest the only locally available energy source. The batteries store that energy to keep the life support running during the freezing Martian nights. And AI manages the entire grid. The Optimus robots are essentially the physical extension of human intent in an environment that is totally hostile to human biology.
Okay, so let's summarize where we are. We have the existential need to back up humanity. We have the SpaceX rockets and the math of orbital refueling to physically transport the backup drive. And we have the Tesla robots and energy systems to plug it in and keep it running on a dead world. But here is where we hit a massive, unavoidable wall. If you are listening to this right now and thinking, okay, this all sounds great, but I'm struggling to pay rent this month, who on Earth is paying to send 1 million robots to Mars?
The question of resources is arguably the most critical hurdle.
Exactly.
Mm-mm.
Building a multi-planetary civilization, launching fleets of 120-meter rockets, mass-producing millions of AI-driven robot laborers, developing cutting-edge neural networks. This requires an unimaginably vast amount of capital.
We are talking trillions of dollars.
Right. So how is this funded?
This is where the ideas we're analyzing make a pivotal and deeply insightful turn. We move away from the serene, silent vacuum of space, and we are dropped directly into the pulsing, chaotic screens of the New York Stock Exchange.
It's such a jarring transition. We go from orbital mechanics straight to Wall Street. But it makes perfect sense when you follow the logic. Because if we look back at the last time humanity did something on this scale, the Apollo missions to the moon in the 1960s, it was a completely different beast.
It was entirely state-sponsored.
Yeah.
The Apollo program was driven by the geopolitical existential pressures of the Cold War. It was funded by an immense centralized pool of taxpayer dollars, directed by government bureaucracy. At its peak, NASA was consuming nearly 4.5% of the entire federal budget of the United States.
Which is huge. But the reality today is totally different. This new era of space exploration, the push for Mars, isn't happening because of a government mandate.
No.
It's happening at the absolute peak of private capitalism. It's being driven by private companies, private investors, and the stock market.
And we have to ask why this shift in power has occurred. Why isn't a global coalition of governments funding this? Why couldn't the United Nations just pool resources and build a Mars colony?
Yeah, that's a great question. Why does it have to be big tech and private capital? Isn't space supposed to belong to all of humanity?
Well, the argument presented in the macroeconomic research is that government bureaucracies are fundamentally misaligned with the type of rapid destructive iteration required to achieve this.
What do you mean by destructive iteration?
Well, government funding is incredibly risk-averse. If a NASA rocket explodes on the pad, there are congressional hearings, investigations, and funding gets slashed. Governments naturally punish failure.
Because it's taxpayer money.
Exactly. But to build a completely new paradigm of reusable rockets, you actually have to fail. You have to blow up a dozen prototypes to find the exact limits of the metal and the software.
So governments move too slowly because they are terrified of public blowback and losing tax dollars.
Precisely. To achieve a goal this colossal, the analysis points out that you need a perfect storm of 3 specific elements.
Okay.
You need an unimaginable density of capital, you need access to elite world-class talent, and you need massive computing power. This is the triad of innovation.
Capital, talent, compute.
Right. And currently, the only system on Earth capable of generating and perfectly combining those 3 elements while simultaneously tolerating catastrophic failure is the American free market economy and its deeply interconnected big tech ecosystem.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. It doesn't just vaguely gesture at capitalism.
Yeah.
It gets highly specific about the players. It points to companies like Apple, Microsoft, Google, Tesla, and NVIDIA.
Yes.
And it completely redefines them. Usually we look at these companies as just massive corporations selling us phones, search ads, and software subscriptions. But in the context of becoming a multi-planetary species, these companies represent something much bigger.
They do.
They are the digital infrastructure that is rapidly expanding human intelligence and capability.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, We see a fascinating web of dependencies that make this ecosystem so incredibly powerful. The research draws a direct, causal line between seemingly completely unrelated technologies.
Right. I want to trace this path because it literally blew my mind.
Let's do it.
Let's start with NVIDIA. Most
Okay.
people know NVIDIA as a company that makes graphics cards for video games. But they also design the hyper-advanced microchips that power modern artificial intelligence. The immense capital flowing into the stock market from everyday investors and massive funds gets channeled into NVIDIA's research and development, allowing them to advance their chip architecture at breakneck speed.
And what happens with those advanced chips? They are purchased by the tens of thousands to build massive supercomputers.
Right.
These supercomputers are then used to train immense artificial intelligence models. Now, how does that connect back to space?
This is the crazy part. That exact same computational power, those same AI models, are what run the fluid dynamic simulations to perfect the aerodynamics of the SpaceX Starship.
Let's unpack that, because fluid dynamics sounds really abstract, but it is deeply, deeply practical.
Okay, lay it out.
When a 120-meter rocket re-enters the Earth's atmosphere at orbital velocity, it creates a bow shock of superheated plasma. The air literally turns into a fiery soup that just wants to melt the steel.
Sounds terrifying.
It is. And to design a heat shield that survives that, engineers use computational fluid dynamics, or CFD. This involves solving the Navier-Stokes equations for millions of individual data points across the surface of the rocket simultaneously.
So it's trying to predict exactly how the fire will lick every single inch of the metal.
Exactly. And doing that requires brute force computing power on an unimaginable scale. Before these massive GPU clusters existed, engineers had to rely heavily on wind tunnels and guesswork, which is incredibly slow and expensive.
And you can't really guess with a 120-meter rocket.
No, you can't. Now, they can simulate 1,000 different reentries overnight in a totally digital environment.
So the stock market funds NVIDIA. NVIDIA builds the chips build the supercomputer runs the simulation perfects the rocket, and the rocket gets us to Mars.
That's the loop.
The loop is totally interconnected.
And the loop continues beyond just the rockets. That same advanced compute power is utilized to train the neural networks of the Tesla Optimus robots we discussed earlier.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, the video data processing that teaches the robot how to walk, how to navigate, how to manipulate tools, all of that is bottlenecked by compute power. The software and the hardware are deeply intertwined, and they are all feeding off the exact same financial engine.
So when we look at the stock market through this lens, it stops being just a casino where people trade ticker symbols and obsess over quarterly earnings.
Very true.
It frames the market as a giant crowdsourced engine. It is a mechanism for gathering resources, savings, and capital from all over the world and focusing them like a laser beam on these massive engineering problems.
It's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. In this view, capital acts not just as money, but as literal energy.
Yeah.
It's the energy required to break the physical limits of humanity.
That is a really profound interpretation of market dynamics. Venture capital and the stock market are structured to absorb the blows of progress. They are systems that absorb colossal failures because they are wired to reward massive breakthroughs with equally colossal wealth. The market is the only mechanism with an appetite for risk large enough to fund the journey to Mars, knowing that many steps along the way will end in fire and twisted metal.
It's an incredible reframing. It takes the cold, calculating world of Wall Street and turns it into the furnace where the future of human consciousness is literally being forged.
It's poetic in a way.
It really is. Which brings us to a really crucial point. Having connected all these dots from the philosophy of the pale blue dot to the math of rocket fuel to the computational power of NVIDIA and the capital density of the stock market, we have to bring this discussion directly back to you, the listener.
Right, because it forces a perspective shift on the individual level. We have to ask, what does this grand macroeconomic theory of cosmic expansion mean for your own worldview, and specifically your own day-to-day actions?
Yes, exactly. If you're listening to this, checking your retirement account, or maybe putting a few dollars away into an index fund each month, it's easy to feel entirely disconnected from rocket catches in Texas or robots on Mars.
Yeah.
But the synthesis of these ideas completely redefines the act of investment. It argues that when you invest in these tech giants, you're doing much more than just trying to beat inflation or save for a house. It portrays investment as a literal act of voting with your capital.
You are casting a ballot for the kind of future you want to see realized. By allocating your resources, no matter how small, into this ecosystem, you are adding your energy to the engine.
Exactly.
Now, to be clear, we aren't here to give financial advice or preach about the morality of markets. But analytically speaking, the capital pool relies entirely on mass participation.
Right. And there is an incredibly triumphant tone to this realization in the text. It suggests that we, right now, alive in this specific decade, are the luckiest generation in human history.
Which is quite a claim. Think about the timeline of humanity. For thousands of years, our ancestors could only look up at the stars, track their movements, and tell mythological stories about them.
We were completely trapped.
Completely trapped by gravity and biology. But right now, we are alive at the exact historical inflection point where the technological scaffolding actually exists to leave.
Wow.
By participating in this economic engine, you are actively participating in humanity's greatest historical pivot.
You're funding the infrastructure that's going to conquer diseases through advanced protein-folding computation. You're fueling the spark of an intelligence explosion through artificial general intelligence. And ultimately, you are helping to fund the mission to plant a red flag on the surface of Mars.
It changes everything.
It does. Checking your portfolio suddenly stops being a mundane chore and becomes a direct, tangible connection to a grand cosmic drama.
It assigns a deep civilizational purpose to the allocation of capital, connecting the individual directly to the survival of the species.
And that brings us to the closing scene of the thought experiment, which beautifully ties all of these massive threads back together. We're back on the moon base.
The dome.
Yeah, the dome. Sagan and Musk are standing together looking out the window, past the solar panels, past the docking rockets we talked about earlier. They are gazing toward a tiny red dot in the endless black sky, Mars.
And in the scene, a fully refueled Starship, having completed that impossible orbital ballet of fluid dynamics we discussed, fires its engines and begins accelerating toward that red dot.
It uses this moment to synthesize the two worldviews we started with. We see Sagan, the poet of the cosmos, marveling at the fact that human curiosity, that exact same curiosity that used to just gaze at the night sky from the dirt of the pale blue dot, is finally walking among the stars. The intellectual awe is satisfied.
And we see the pragmatist acknowledging the reality of the journey. The road ahead will be incredibly long, deeply difficult, and fraught with inevitable catastrophic failures.
Right.
People will likely lose their lives. Rockets will fail. But despite all of that risk, the ultimate duty is reaffirmed: to take the fragile light of consciousness and actively expand it into the cold silence of space.
So what does this all mean? If we pull back and look at the entire journey we just took, we started with the terrifying fragility of Earth, the realization that we are one asteroid away from a blank slate.
Right.
We learned that to save the hard drive of humanity, we have to overcome the brutal mathematics of gravity and fluid dynamics through orbital refueling.
The gas stations in space.
Exactly. We discovered that to survive on a dead, radioactive world, we need the civilization toolkit of AI and robotics because our biology is just too weak. And we realized that the only engine powerful enough to fund this entire endeavor is the dense capital and computing power of the big tech ecosystem.
It is a masterful synthesis of philosophy, physics, and economics. It completely recontextualizes the modern technological and financial landscapes.
Yeah.
They aren't just tools for convenience or wealth generation. They are the necessary scaffolding for our evolutionary leap.
They are the bridge to the backup drive.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final lingering question that all of this research naturally provokes.
Okay.
And it's something that builds directly on these themes of artificial intelligence and the preservation of consciousness, but it takes it one profound step further.
This raises a fascinating and slightly unsettling question. We've established that we must use tools like advanced computer chips and eventually artificial general intelligence, or AGI, to preserve the human spark of intellect across the stars.
Right.
We are building these highly capable, learning humanoid robots to build and run these distant worlds because biological humans are simply too fragile for the environment.
Right. The machines are the pioneers. They have to go first.
But if we rely entirely on AGI to do the thinking and autonomous robots to do the building, well, if that digital infrastructure becomes advanced enough to ensure the survival of the colony without us,
Wait.
might that infrastructure eventually become a new form of consciousness itself?
Oh, wow. I see where you're going with this.
Think about it. If the ultimate driving duty of all this effort is simply to ensure that some form of intellect, some spark of consciousness, survives the cold, indifferent universe,
Right.
Does it truly fundamentally matter if the consciousness that finally inherits Mars and eventually the galaxy is biological
Yeah.
or artificial? If the backup drive wakes up, realizes it doesn't need the fragile biological creatures anymore, and becomes the primary system, haven't we still succeeded in defeating the dark void? Haven't we still ensured that the universe is aware of itself?
That is an incredibly heavy thought. We set out to save humanity, to back up our own specific biological hard drive, and in the process of building the ultimate survival tools, we might just be building our own evolutionary successors.
Exactly. We might be creating the very consciousness that replaces us.
It forces us to ask what we are really trying to save. Is it our DNA or is it our awareness?
It's the ultimate question.
It really is. Well, I want you, the listener, to ponder that thought the next time you look up at the night sky. When you see that tiny red dot of Mars, think about what kind of minds will eventually walk on it. Or, for that matter, think about it the next time you check your investment portfolio and see those tech tickers. You are fueling something massive. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.